Lindsey Granger. Lindsey, hello. It was a big show. Our correspondent that was there says 30,000 people were there, Beyonce endorsing Harris. But explain to me why Texas was chosen.
Yeah, I think Texas was such an interesting choice, especially when we've been spending the last few weeks focusing on those swing states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and places where we're not sure exactly what's going to happen. I think that Kamala was trying to make a statement not only to say to the rest of the states and the countries that might feel unseen and unheard because of these swing states that we hear you and we see you, but also to go back home to what her main points and issues were on this campaign trail, which was standing up for women's rights, something that she did prior to being the nominee. Biden sent her forward facing on that issue from prior to switching candidates. And so I think that she's trying to be effective and maintain those suburban women voters. And she knew that the world and the country more specifically were watching. And I think she wanted to drive home that message one more time with all the different guests and herself to say, listen, sober up the moment. This is a real issue. We're 10 days away from election. Listen up. And she wanted to bring Beyonce out, not as a celebrity like Beyonce has come out in 2016 for Hillary or even for Beto O'Rourke in the Senate race. She came out and she said it herself as a mother. And I think that that was effective because suburban women and people around the world that the Democratic Party is still trying to grasp are watching this and looking and remembering what really turned them off about the law of the land, which was Roe v. Wade being repealed, and what they think about some of these most restrictive abortion laws that could come to their state, like in Texas.
Lindsey, you just alluded to this, and I want to go a bit further because we know reproductive rights are an issue that motivate Democrats. But at this point in the race, 10 days, is this enough to bring in those undecided voters that both candidates are really counting on?
Well, I think that everyone's trying to tap back into what they knew was going to be their main issue. So when we look at the latest polls, we know that both candidates are deadlocked across the country almost with like 48% of the vote. And so I think that they have to realize that a lot of the big tactics, like even big celebrities, bringing out Oprah, bashing the other candidate, which both sides were doing, were not as effective as they probably should have been, because then there would be one landslide obvious winner at this point, or somebody who was least in the lead. But we're seeing such a close tie that I think that Kamala is trying to tap back into what her original messaging was, and also separate herself from some of the things of the overall campaign and the economy and some things that people are feeling right now, which are the biggest issues. We know that internationally, the world is looking like it's on the brink of a mess in a lot of situations. We know that the economy is not ideal and that people are still feeling inflation. And these are the top issues. But Kamala wants people to remember that it's bigger and longer and may affect your children if they don't have access to the same rights that you had under the protections of Roe v. Wade. And so I think she wanted to drive that message home one last time before she probably spends the last 10 days in all those swing states, like we saw some of her counterparts and vice president doing yesterday as well.
And we're showing this poll from the New York Times, Siena, that shows people are just as concerned about abortion as they are with immigration at 15%. There's no doubt abortion and reproductive rights is the issue that Harris is strongest on. However, it's not a clear message when it comes to immigration and the economy. Why has she not been able to articulate that message on those key issues, Lindsey?
I think it's really tough because you have somebody who is a sitting vice president, and Joe Biden is still the president. And I think that that interview, and we saw Trump play a clip of that last night at his Michigan rally, of Kamala saying on The View that she wouldn't do much differently, and I'm paraphrasing, than Biden did, is a really big moment, where a missed opportunity to try to figure out how to word that as a campaign. Because obviously, I mean, Joe Biden had 4 years of presidency where people saw immigration get out of control. You guys know we did a full report here in Aurora and Denver about what's going on with immigration. And so I think some of those issues really touch home for a lot of people that are seeing the economy go awry and immigration seem out of control in many states, and only start to get under control when emergency orders were put in place, a lot of which was a conversation amongst the Republican Party, which we know did knock down that entire bill that was in place. But some people look at that bill as coming about way too late in the game. And what were those first 3 years doing when immigration was slowly bubbling and getting out of control? And so I think that that's a lot of the conversation about how do you separate yourself from a sitting president without kind of being condescending or being too abrasive with your party. And Kamala's having trouble doing that because she already has been pinned in many ways as flip-flopping on a few issues, and she doesn't want to do that too many more times, because then the voter just won't trust the things that are coming out of her mouth so close to election day.
Well,
so I think she's walking a really fine line, but has to figure out how to word that.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.